You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Critics scorch Platner overtaking Time video after new accusation upends Maine race, based on an article by David Badash. When a Senate campaign tries to outrun the allegation, the story beneath the story, the factual core is simple. Politico reported that Maine Democratic Senate nominee Graham Platner is facing an allegation from Jenny Racicot, who says he forced sex on her despite repeated objections. Platner denies it. He answered with a video within minutes, insisting the accusation was categorically false while also saying he was taking time to reflect on his next move. That is not clarity, that is crisis management dressed up as conscience. Who actually holds power? The real institutional power here is not in Platner's wounded-sounding video. It sits with the campaign apparatus, party elites, donors, elected Democrats, and the media ecosystem now deciding whether he remains viable. Platner is acting like a campaign asset whose value must be re-estimated, not a public servant answering a grave allegation with plain accountability. Even the language around him reveals the hierarchy. The question is no longer only what happened, but whether he can still beat Susan Collins. That is where power lies in modern politics, not in truth, but in viability. What his statement avoids. Platner's video does two things at once. It denies the allegation, and it shifts the frame toward electoral loyalty, movement identity, and the shared goal of defeating Collins. That move is strategic. It asks supporters to treat a serious accusation as a distraction from the larger cause. That is exactly the misdirection. A claim of non-consensual sex is not a branding problem. It is not a communications hiccup. It is an allegation about harm, coercion, and conduct. Turning it into a question of campaign momentum is a way of making the accused the injured party and the accuser background noise. The usual political reflex. This is how political machines protect themselves, not always by denying reality, but by subordinating it to the race. The immediate discussion becomes withdrawal, replacement names, and whether the campaign can survive. Ryan Grimm reported that Platner may be considering dropping out. Others are already floating substitutes. That is the operative language of elite politics. Not accountability, not repair, just substitution. Tim Miller's reaction got to the blunt truth in one sentence. Either the allegation is false and Platner campaigns, or it is true and he exits. The rest is managerial fog. Taking time to reflect is what organizations say when they want the scandal to cool before they decide whether the person is still useful. What this reveals about the Democratic coalition. This is not a story about purity tests. It is a story about whether a Democratic coalition can keep its own standards when power is at stake. If Democrats are serious about being the institutional barrier to authoritarian politics, they cannot treat serious misconduct as a regrettable speed bump on the road to a Senate seat. A party that wants to defend democracy cannot outsource its ethics to polling, nor let its candidates hide behind anti-Collins rhetoric as if opposition to Susan Collins absolves everything else. Voters are supposed to believe the mission is bigger than one race. Fine. Then the standards have to be bigger too. The larger pattern. The deeper pattern is familiar. Political institutions absorb allegations of abuse by converting them into scheduling problems, media cycles, and tactical calculations. The person with the most power is not always the person with the loudest grievance. Often it is the machine that decides whether the allegation becomes a reckoning or a footnote. That is the corruption here. Not only the alleged conduct, but the reflex to manage democratic legitimacy as though it were a campaign asset ledger. When institutions keep asking whether the candidate can still win before they ask what the accusation means, they are already telling you what they value. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Amy, thanks for listening.